You're with us here on a fresh new edition of Trading Hour, last trading day of the week, and what a, action-packed Friday this is turning out to be. Big news item after, big news item. And already, since the morning, we've had three of them. There has been, the big listing, which has been a blockbuster, the Zomato IPO, which has exceeded expectations. Grey market expectations were between 50 and 30 rupees. But the listing and where it is trading now is blown past those levels. Then we had the Vodafone Idea judgment, which came through just some time back. We covered that extensively and got your opinion as well. That is a big blow for Vodafone Idea. And third, there is the future Amazon story, which we will get to with our colleague Mugdha in a bit from now as well. So, three counting, maybe more to go. With me over the next 60 minutes, my colleague Reema Tendulkar. Hi, Reema.
Hi Prashant, and the big one to go will be Reliance Industry numbers, which will come out late in the evening, closer to perhaps 7 o'clock. The press conference is at 7:30, so that is going to be crucial to track. And then, of course, tomorrow will be ICICI. So lots to talk about in the next 1 hour. For now, the market at the index level is absolutely quiet. It's pretty flat. The Nifty is hovering around the 15,830 mark. The Sensex is showing you a gain of close to about 40 points. Quiet moves. The advanced decline ratio, however, currently is in favor of the losing side. Let's move on and talk about the big stock of the day, and that is clearly Zomato, and we'll keep coming back to that. But I just want to put on board that Info Edge, remember, has a close to about a 15% stake in Zomato. Now, given Zomato's blockbuster listing, the valuation of Zomato in Info Edge will also consequently go up. So at currently, I think Zomato is closer to that 130 rupee mark, which puts its valuation in excess of 1 lakh crore mark, which means Zomato's Info Edge's stake in Zomato is now valued closer to 1,200 rupees per share, which is actually higher than analyst expectations. I was taking a look at the recent Info Edge analyst reports in the last 3 months, and from the likes of Nomura as well as CLSA, they all estimated Zomato's valuation in Info Edge closer to that 850-900 mark. So, the Zomato listing does provide an upside to Info Edge given its 15% holding in the stock. The stock of Info Edge, however, is not reacting too much. It's pretty flat, just holding with a minor gain, and that could be attributed to the fact that in the last few years, the stock has been such a compounder. It's been, its wealth creator in the last 5 years. Info Edge stock, Prashant, has gone up by more than 500%.
Oh, absolutely. Reema, so that's, quite something. It's a muted reaction on Info Edge, but let's talk about Zomato now, because that is the real deal today, at least. Mangalam is standing by. He's been covering the journey of Zomato ever since they filed the DRHP, the subscription, and the IPO was open, and now finally day one as far as listing is concerned. Mangalam, this has exceeded expectations, all expectations.
It's exceeded all expectations, and 1 lakh crore in terms of listing. It's a strong listing for Zomato. The first new commerce concept stock, so to say, on Indian bourses. It opened 60% higher than the issue price and continues to surge higher as there was clamor for buying. Remember, the issue was subscribed 38 times already. Even from the listing price, the stock has gained over 15% currently sitting with a gain of almost 8% on debut, the stock has crossed the coveted 1 trillion rupees market cap. That's 1 lakh crores. However, just be mindful of the valuations. It's now trading at 18 times FY23 price to sales. Remember, there are no earnings for the company. 18 times is 3 times of global players and the same as Nifty's FY23 price to earnings. So just be mindful of the valuations. At current levels, Zomato's market cap has actually crossed that of biggies like Dabur, Godrej Consumer, Pidilite. In fact, Info Edge itself. So, we have seen a big surge in their market cap, top 45 companies. However, their profitability, has been elusive for the company on both EBITDA and the net profit front, despite a sharp surge that we've seen in their revenues over the last few years. But in new commerce businesses, you look at the company's unit economics, and that's seen a profit of almost 20 rupees. For the first time in FY21, that number turned positive. Of course, it was on account of a multitude of factors. The key risk is whether this number sustains or not once things normalize. It's a duopoly currently, so competition from Swiggy is something that we'll be watching out for as well. A potential disruption from Amazon too may topple the apple cart, but it is a highly underpenetrated, fast-growing market. So the company is commanding top dollar. The street is giving it generate much more than what the company commanded. And at most optimistic projections, it is around 16, 17 times FY23 sales. Whether this performance satiates the massive appetite or massive valuation that has been built in, the proof of that pudding, of course, will lie in the eating, literally.
Absolutely, Mangalam. That's a nice compilation of what's happened today since the morning, and we'll sort of keep up with this as the day goes by. So 126 or so is where we are at. We have Sudheer Guntapalli, lead analyst of technology sector at ICICI Securities, with his perspective. He's written extensively on this particular sector, this particular space. This morning, by the way, he's got a note out. Broadly, I'm paraphrasing here, but the note says, how not to have regrets when looking at internet companies from an investment point of view. I mean, how not to look back and say, well, I should have invested in that thing. At that point, it looked expensive, but obviously it is not so. Sudhir, I guess, I hope I got the gist of it correct. Just walk us through first, what do you make of the listing valuations of Zomato? As Mangalam and I were discussing, it's exceeded expectations, or pretty much all expectations out there.
Yeah, Prashant, thanks for having me here. And in terms of valuations, if you remember last time we met also, I have highlighted the point that it's a near-term valuation is a misleading metric to look at this company, given that neither the sales nor the profitability structure has yet attained the steady state, right? So this is exactly a reiteration of that point that we have written in today's note also, that many a times when investors tend to look at FY22 or 1 year forward or 2 year forward sales and 2 year forward profits for such companies, which are in high growth phase, obviously valuations tend to look very expensive. But the fact of the matter is, we should not be excessively worried about the near-term valuations or the near-term profitability, because the stage, I understand the fact that profitability and cash flows are great sanity metrics, but those metrics are better applied on steady-state companies, let us say the likes of TCS, Infosys, so on and so forth, which have reached a steady state, attained a steady state, and they became a cash-generating machines, right? But for companies which are in high-growth phase, in fact, it's the other way around. If a company is focusing too much on profitability, focusing too much on cash flows at a very early stage in life, we have seen instances of some internet companies actually limiting their scalability factors over the long-term periods. So from that standpoint, I would reiterate the same point which I highlighted earlier also, that near-term profitability, near-term sales, and near-term valuations are, misleading metrics to look at such companies like Zomato or any of the upcoming internet IPOs as well. Some of the upcoming internet IPOs as well.
Sudhir, morning. So if one should not focus on valuations in the near term, should you only be looking at the sales growth over the next 2 years, say for a company like Zomato? And at what point do we start tracking the cash flows as well as the profitability metrics? How many years do you give such companies? 2 years, 5 years?
Sure, Rima. So it's not about counting the number of years. I think one point we should note here is that any big brand, right, it is not established overnight. As they say, Rome is not built in a day, right? Any big company or any big brand is not established overnight. That is point number one. And point number two is, especially when you are trying to sell a new category to customer, it obviously takes a long period of time. So take very simple and fundamental basic categories like soap or a pizza or let's say a B2B classified sort of a business. The current market leaders, today's market leaders in those businesses have kind of spent 15 to 25 years in terms of driving the customer adoption and in terms of building their brands. But actually, if you focus on Zomato, Swiggy, and all these new age companies, or most of the successful new age companies, actually, if you see, the adoption happened quite earlier than what it happened, how it panned out, let's say in some of the examples like a soap or a pizza, so on and so forth. So Zomato, for all practical purposes, is a 4 to 5 year old company. They started this delivery only in 2017. And by now they have driven significant customer adoption of a new category which has hitherto not existed in this economy, right? For instance, we estimate that outside the urban core, in the next 500 towns outside the top 20 cities, we currently estimate around 16% adoption of Zomato and Swiggy, which is a phenomenal achievement on part of these companies, right? So, they are building the brand, they are driving customer adoption of a category which has not existed in the old economy. So from that standpoint, I think we should ideally give them some more time before judging them on their profitability, before judging them on their cash flows. And let me remind you the fact that the brand they're building or the customer adoption they're driving today, it will be a back-ended moat for them, which will help their business for several years to come by. So that's the reason why I said, it's a 4-year-old company for all practical purposes, despite starting off in 2008, 2009. So let's give them some more time before actually seeing how the business model scales up. So at this juncture, we'll solely be focused on, the scalability angle here, the overall market potential here. And the third factor is a healthy unit economics before, let's say, marketing/branding overheads. And once this branding overheads are done, how that unit economics can translate into strong margins and strong cash flows. That's what we'll be focused about at this juncture.
Sudheer, just one last briefly, if you can respond to this. Info Edge, what does this mean for Info Edge valuations?
Sure, Prashant. I think as Rima was highlighting in her initial remarks, and I'll give you a broad thumb rule, the broad math here, every $1 billion valuation of Zomato will have roughly around 100 rupees impact on the SOTP pricing of Info Edge, right? I think she was showing the consensus numbers before the start of this interview. And most of the sell-side analysts or most of the consensus is currently at 700, 800 odd rupees, sort of an implied SOTP valuation for Zomato with an Info Edge target price forecasting. But now if you see from an $8 to $9 billion kind of an pricing, the stock is Zomato stock is almost trading at 50%, 60% sort of a premium. And as I said, for every $1 billion increase in the valuation of Zomato, the SOTP target price of Info Edge should increase by around 100 rupees. So there is a mathematical arbitrage. Rima was correct. There is a mathematical arbitrage of around 400, 500 rupees in Info Edge stock as I see it now. From the 50 to 100 rupees, if you strictly apply the math of whatever listing valuation of Zomato, if you strictly translate that into Info Edge SOTP, there is a 400, 500 rupees upside from the current market price.
Sudheer, it's a pleasure. Quick
Everything else remaining constant.
Yeah, no, absolutely, as always. Thanks very much for your time. Great to have you with us here with that perspective on an important day for the internet startup space. Zomato, that is. And Info Edge is the other one. It's not responding, but as Sudheer pointed out, $1 billion adds 100 rupees in Info Edge valuations in terms of SOTP. And he thinks there is 400 to 500 rupees on the, left to price in where Zomato is trading right now relative to what was built in till this point in time. Let's go across to the other big story. The Karnataka division bench has dismissed Amazon Flipkart appeals against a single